what are some methods to encourage behavior change and getting folks to report phishing? Oh, it scrolled up. Sorry. Report phishing, social engineering attacks instead of just deleting them. I know to back up this person, I personally know when my wife and my mother-in-law both work at the healthcare system I do. And when I ask them about like the latest round, they're like, I just deleted it. I didn't report rather than report it. And I get so frustrated. So Mike Peterson, what are some incentives that, right?
Right.
I mean, we're human beings to I think it was Mike
And
or Phil's point, like let's incentivize them.
yeah, incent good behavior, right? And I think going back to when, some of these tools first came into play and security awareness training first kind of started, it was more about punishing, right? Oh, you clicked on this, we're going to lock you up, we're going to put you into a training session that you have to sit through for a half an hour. And as things kind of evolved, we realized that necessarily isn't a good method of doing of incentivizing good behavior, right? Punishing bad behavior. So you can also incent it in a way where you're tracking, okay, and doing some metrics around, okay, they didn't click on an email and they also notified their internal support, hey, look at this email, something's not right, I see it, and those are ways of tracking a good behavior as well, right? And then sending that type of behavior where you're actually reporting and not just deleting an email, because you're not going to learn by deleting, you're going to learn by sending it off to internal support. Then internal support can even utilize that email as a, hey, this is something we found you guys need to be aware of, and utilize it maybe within the training program and pushing it out that way.
Phil, is that something we could scale to company size? Right. I mean, a smaller business isn't going to have like a big budget for this. Is it something to where even something simple as a knockoff of a coffee cup? Like I know that way back in the day, we had these fishing cups for like bigger prizes, but I never thought about it. I'm like, could you scale your incentive programs? I mean,
yeah, there's a lot of people who scale incentive programs. I guess I kind of see deleting an email that's, looks malicious also a good behavior. Reporting's obviously better because it does help. Obviously something, the email tool missed it, something missed here and we need to figure out why, and so that we can get it in the future. But a lot of times we're dealing with technological limitations. Where's the report a phish button for your phone? There's not really
mobile app. That's a good point.
When you're in a company in your mobile app, everybody most people, sales folks, especially people out in the field, they're checking on their phone. And if their reaction immediately at their fingertip is to swipe whatever and click delete, great. I like that. Personally, I find that fantastic. But having the ability to maybe forward to, your phish at company.com or, sock at company.com, something like that I've seen before. Incentivizing, good behaviors is always good. And I think deleting is a good one. But yeah, giving them something that's so easy. Like I said, swiping to say, I'm deleting this, super easy for them. A little bit harder to say, let me type in an email or something like that on the thing they use the most. But, if they have an email client in their actual computer, it's a lot easier because usually you can put some kind of button or app right there in the toolbar that can be like report that. And that can be done. But
to your question too, Aaron, I'm sorry to jump in as well, but I saw something just 2 days ago on LinkedIn where a company had just gotten through a security awareness training program, and they basically had a kind of like a little awards ceremony where they actually awarded some of their employees on good behavior and doing the right thing. And what was neat is they also reached out to their security vendors, and the security vendors actually donated some of the prizes, and so you get that
free marketing,
right?
Good call.
But it's, if like you said, if it's a small budget, you can always do some outreach to some of your partners and vendors to see if they can, donate some some awards and prizes when it comes to that.
Excellent. Another good question coming in. I think I'm going to attempt this one because I have daughters. I'm used to Little Mermaid. Ariel has another great question. I'm going to shoot this one off to you, Tim. We talked about restricting information like on a website. Ariel talks about what would you recommend replacing a Meet the Team website section with? That is a great question. I'm going to noodle on that. I want to answer that one, but I want to hear Tim first.
Yeah, oh, it's great. So, first of all, just as Mike D has been emphasizing, we want to start with the risk. If we understand the risk, then we can progress from there. So the risk here, and I've seen this several times this year, is where an evil hacker goes to somebody's website and they see, here's the CEO, here's the finance person, here's their name, here's the phone number. And the evil hacker doesn't attack that company. They attack that company's customers. So they'll send an email to the customer saying, hey, we've changed our billing address. Send your payments to this new bank account number. And they've got the CFO's picture, their name, and their phone number, and they can make an email that looks like it came from your company. And they're not hacking you, they're hacking your customers. So what you can do is, one, is that you can, if you're going to put information like that on your website, like Meet the Team, use alternative email addresses and phone numbers that aren't going to be used for official business communications. Make them separate for marketing on the website. So make a difference in how that information is done and put things in place which will flag if that information is used. Then do a little bit of training with your partners, with your suppliers, with your customers. We are never going to contact you about any accounting things unless it comes from this address and includes this information or from this phone number. And make sure that there's
training your supply chain.
Yeah, just
love it.
Yeah, and just doing those things will thwart most of these cons. So, make that information that you publish about Meet the Team, use that information in such a way that you're using a Google Voice number that doesn't come up with your company's name on it. If someone uses that, hacks it to call somebody else, put some things in there that are going to be red flags and make sure those red flags trip something.
Yeah, I've seen that a lot too. Setting up a separate domain.
Yeah.
You could do a separate mailbox off the channel. And again, we always recommend making it personal here. We always encourage individuals that are doing their financial bill pay and everything else to use a separate email address. Like Tim mentioned, a separate Google Voice number. It's almost like the DMZ concept with firewalls, right? We put our more critical access processes and such in a different network. It's the same thing that we should look at in the social communication, email, what we're putting out there in the public world. And it's about reducing the risk of human factor cybersecurity risk. We're not going to eliminate them all. There's always going to be a residual, but do we even know what that residual is, right? And so it's minimizing with technology and process. And then, that's a great isolation.
So Phil, one of the things that I get pushed back on, right, when I do some requirements at work, especially, as we move to more hybrid cloud and stuff like this, and even trying to train IT people is things like MFA for admins, right? Like what would be your recommendations for in this program concept of even training people that are already in IT that, well, that's just hard, or I don't want to do that. That's an extra step. What suggestions would you have to everybody on getting that person that has been in a data center for 25 years and I've never used MFA and I've never had an issue, but new attacks are coming out. How do you train that stubborn old middle-aged white dude?
Hey,
Do you resemble that remark?
I resemble that, Mark, so I can poke fun at myself.
All right. So a couple things we've already mentioned, right, is getting the buy-in from the top. So, you may have those technical people who go, well, I've never had this problem before. Well, you've got a couple people your senior who are expecting, us to evaluate these things and begin doing these practices. And so getting that buy-in, at the senior level is very important. Number two is, I think, first of all, what we have to determine is, much like if you've ever seen the shared responsibility models from AWS, which is a little bit messy, but the even cleaner one is Microsoft. There's a shared responsibility model for Azure where they say at various levels where you control configurations and how things are set up in your VMs. But when you move over to software as a service, pretty much you have no control over any of these things. And these are the things at the data level or at the permission level you have control over. There's definitely a RACI or a shared responsibility model that has to be come up with to say, here's what security is doing for you. Here's what security is enabling you to do. And then here are things that are just purely your responsibility to do as good IT operations. We cannot do your MFA for you. You must do that yourself. We can set the requirements, but you have to carry those out. And so first of all, educating people on their role is important. And this is important for users too. When you tell them you're in accounting and you're processing billing, here's threats directly to you. These are your responsibilities. We've tried to, make your job a little easier to spot these issues, but here's ways to spot these issues, or here's things and practices you need to put in place to ensure you don't accidentally give someone else money instead of your supplier, or someone walks away with your money, or that they're trying to pay you. So I think that's where it starts, is letting people know and getting them comfortable and understanding of what their responsibilities to carry things out are, what they're accountable to, and just letting them know you will be measuring these things as well and reporting these up to senior management so that they know what the coverage of MFA looks like. How many privileged access accounts do we have? Do you have an environment where 50 people are domain admin? Hint, it should only be 1 or 2 people. And nobody should have the enterprise admin account. No, that should be a break glass somewhere in a safe deposit box. So those are the types of things that you need to have before you start figuring out what education pieces do we need to start giving to people. And a lot of the places to look at your standards, look at your policies, because a lot of times that's a good place to figure out who needs to be educated on what they need to be doing and how they need to be doing it.
So it's a good segue into the next talking point. I know we started a little bit late, so I'm going to take this close as to 11 o'clock as I can, and we still got most of the people here. So Tim, do businesses understand that it's not always going to be a security tool that you're going to purchase in your program? Sometimes these are business process changes. You talked about where, putting more education towards accounting, but it may be a business process change rather than a technology change. Is that something that your bigger clients understand? Because to me, that would be a situation where you could probably easily get a mom and pop or a medium-sized business to understand that value, right? Because there's less spend. Right. They don't have to spend a lot of extra money to do something more securely. Mm-hmm. Do you find with some of your larger clients, the understanding that you don't always have to fix it with a security tool? You can do some training around business processes.
No, not typically. I think the key phrase that's been going around for years is the siloed responsibilities and the silos inside organizations. And unfortunately, security is not immune to that. Getting the concept across that security goes all the way up to the board of directors, and that shared security is part of everyone in the organization is absolutely key. And unfortunately, that understanding seems to be relatively rare. Typically, we're battling trying to get people to understand that security goes beyond the IT department. So trust comes from the top down. If your CEO is getting the same security awareness training and information and exercises that your janitor is, you're absolutely doing it wrong, even if you're a small organization. People look to the people at the top of the organization and their behaviors in order to model their security behavior And that directly relates to the maturity, the security maturity of your organization. So when we're talking about fundamentally behavior change, we have a very bad misconception. We think across the board, people think if you learn something, it's going to change your behavior. And that is absolutely wrong. If you learn something, it's probably not going to change your behavior. The key is what Mike Davenport has been talking about, which is making things personal. To change someone's behavior, you have to address their values. You have to address their values. So when you're talking to the C-level, when you're working with these larger organizations, everything that you do has to be framed within business processes. If you're not talking directly to business processes, you're literally not talking to the organization, because you're talking about something that they don't care about. It's not personal to them, and they don't
The
value.
silo effect that you're talking about.
Yeah.
Yep.
You
Sorry.
have to work through business processes. Everything must be framed with the risk to the business process, or you're not talking in a language that they're going to be able to consume, understand, and change their behavior. And it's really that simple. But until people understand that, we won't be able to change behavior, and we won't be able to get security out of IT.
Yeah, I'd like to add. if
No,
I
go
could
ahead,
here.
Mike.
Yeah, we're now again psychological, but that's exactly what hackers have done, threat actors have done, and looking at behavior patterns and how to change behaviors. And I think sometimes we've made it a little bit more complex than what we need to do. I mean, look at personally, how do we change our behaviors in real life, right? We're all creatures of habit, right? And the way we change it is we introduce a new habit, and we start repeating that habit to where it becomes repetitive. I do self-defense, and sometimes people say, why are we doing this again and again? And then we go to hit them or something, and then all of a sudden they just do what we told them to do, right? It just became habit.
Isn't that the basis of a movie that we all love from the 80s?
Exactly. And so you repeat that. And in cybersecurity, we're talking about defense, we're talking about control, we're talking about business processes. And when we introduce process at first, people are adverse to change. And then we introduce that change depending on how we do it, not too much at once and incrementally. And then that changes behavior, risk reward, identifying the risk to the staff and showing them the reward if you do this, either to our corporation, your department, or you personally. Or I think I saw somebody else here creating a leaderboard, not in
I like that one. Yep.
who's been
Anna.
clicking on stuff, but who's been reporting and showing, hey, this is what would have happened, if we didn't do this. My wife was telling me, we were talking about administrator MFA was one of the questions, should we do it? How should we go about it? The question really is, because I look at it from a hacker perspective, what if you don't, right? We've breached many organizations because of lack of MFA, not the administrator logging in, but because of the tools he or she was using. So habit and changing process, incrementing, but not overloading the user is the best way to change. Without getting into detail, there's a lot of different things we introduce in that process, but changing the process, habit, and repetitive process.
So Mike Peterson, as we're winding down,
Mhm.
do we, and I guess I'd actually like to hear everybody's input on this one. So as we wind things down, how do we take that security awareness program, right? And then the concept of defense in depth and human behavior and marry those three things, right? So that you're going to have people have mistakes. So what's that second level that's going to protect you, right? Is it means somebody else is reviewing it. Tim, maybe it was Tim or Phil talked about like having a different email address. How can we take the concept of a defense in depth and bring it into like a security awareness program so that if this person does happen to click this link, what other processes we can do, again, not relying on technology, so to speak, what other processes that we can do to help protect the company as a whole, even when somebody makes a mistake? I'll start with you, Mike.
Ooh, That was the hardest question of the day, I think. So, looking at just clicking on an email, right? Taking that process and looking and interacting with that person and looking at why you clicked on that link, or that, why was that email successful? And then incorporating that maybe a little bit into the training program as to, here's what I saw in this email, and here's what made me think, okay, this is okay to click. I'm not going to get into trouble there. I know I work with Mike Davenport on multiple accounts, and when he does phishing attacks, it's amazing how many people he can get to click on a link, and it's then the process of following up and determining why was Mike successful in his attempts and his phishing attempts, what made it an email that was clickable, and someone thought, oh, this isn't going to harm my business or get me into trouble on that end. So I think what Mike said too, it's a lot about learned behavior, and then kind of a continual step-by-step process of teaching that behavior within the employee structure. One thing I'll touch on too, just if this is my last conversation here, but one thing I see a lot when you look up, what makes a successful security program, a lot of it is leadership support. That's almost the number one thing, leadership buy-in. But to me, not only is it leadership buy-in or support, but it's leadership participation as well. You want everybody within the organization participating in the program, and what that looks like could be setting up an advisory board, or getting people from each department involved and being a part of the structure and the successfulness of a program, right? So, roundabout way of answering that question, but it goes back to, learned behavior and how you're going to learn off of a mistake, right? That makes it successful.
All right. We'll get a couple parting thoughts, parting gifts, parting thoughts. We'll start with you, Phil. What do you want to close on? What are your defense and depth ideas?
So a bombshell, stop fish testing people. Or at least put less emphasis on it. The idea that humans are like the firewall for your company, that there's a human firewall, or that there's something there that they're like the first line of defense, but it's also the last line of defense, because if somebody clicking an email means your entire company now just got ransomware, and there's more going on than just the human vulnerability of somebody clicked an email.
Yeah.
Right.
I was waiting for someone to bring that up. It was a leading question. Sorry.
Yeah, and so it's really gets down to the level of, with so much investment and so much talking about, fish test people. I think Mike hit it correctly. It's understanding the human behavior. When you go into any type of human-centered incident, whether it's a car accident or whether it's a manufacturing incident where someone lost a finger or something like that, you almost never. It is a extremely slim number of times where someone purposefully or really should have known better because the bar was there, the things that were all there to say. But something that's different in manufacturing, for instance, than emails is the manufacturing machine is not going to all of a sudden jump out of the boundaries and then land on you. Mm-hmm. That kind of happens in our reality. The attacker comes up with something completely new to really just change the boundaries for you. And that happens. So we have to do some level of acceptance. There's kind of a zero trust if you have to say like, okay, the user clicked on something. We know at some point that's going to have to happen. To the right of that incident, you have to start taking a look at where now does that person have access? Where is that MFA? And all of that breaks down. Separation of duties. So you have to keep going in the defensive depth. The human cannot be the first and therefore last measure of defense.
We'll do Mike real quick, and we'll finish up with Mr. Tim. Mike, any parting thoughts?
Yeah, I'll just highlight a few things that Mike and Phil just said, you know, executive leadership involvement and participation, I think is key. Again, I look at it from an attacker perspective, you know, and how we impersonate or identify, you know, those risks, and sometimes the lack of participation, sometimes even from human resources, is an obstacle. So it's getting those parties involved and creating a cybersecurity board almost, right? It's that critical, and over the years we've seen that. The other one is, yeah, the first and last person. You know, there's been such a focus because statistically, I think 91% of all breaches are mostly the initial is the human factor, clicking on something or submitting credentials, lack of MFA, or some type of fatigue. But yeah, there's a bunch in between there, right? There's mitigating controls, right? And it's looking at the program, melding the two, taking that, I'm going to repeat it again, risk-based approach, because you can actually save money taking a risk-based approach, and melding that together for education, awareness, implementation of controls, and just regular communication to staff, right? And changing habits. And then habits become automatic, and then it just becomes the person's nature to be security in depth themselves, let alone your technology. So I'll stop there. That's a loaded
All right.
question.
Tim, 30 seconds. What do you,
Oh my
what's the
goodness.
last,
Okay.
what's the
Okay.
last parting thing?
The mics hitting things really good for buy-in from everyone, buy-in from the top, buy-in from the middle, buy-in from everyone. Phishing is not security awareness. Phishing is a tiny piece of security awareness. We overemphasize this because it's so easy to get numbers and responses with phishing that ignores bring your own device. It ignores social media. It ignores your partners. It ignores your suppliers. It ignores the tabletop exercises that your C-level employees should be going through so that they know how to react to a breach or an attack or a social media hoax, so that they know how to do it and they think about this before it happens, because they don't want to be thinking about it after it happens, because we see classic mistakes happen when people are put on the spot after something's happened. This should all be worked out in advance. Phishing doesn't get employees to understand policy and where to go. Reporting should be valued, and valuing your employees is and getting them to value security, again, around a buy-in, is how we get behavior change. It's all, you have to look at where people's values are. The top business processes will get the top of the organization, and then making it personal, helping protect your family and your friends, and your own well-being helps with the rest of the employees. So get the values, get the buy-in, and stop thinking the entire world of security awareness is about phishing.
What a good way to end. Lori, any housekeeping thoughts? You want to let everybody know there's recording and we'll put it on different channels for anybody. Anything else before we go?
Absolutely. Yeah, no, as we wrap up, I do encourage everybody that is listening, if you think of something after the fact or you have a question that you would like to discuss, you're more than welcome to reach out. You can email us at info@cadre.net. You can connect with us on Twitter, LinkedIn, and Facebook. All you have to do is search for Cadre Information Security, and you will find us on each of those platforms. We will get you connected if you have questions for Mike Davenport, Aaron Bragg, Phil Swaim, Tim O'Connor, and Mike Peterson. So that should cover everything. Thank you again to our panelists for your time, and thank you to everyone that has joined. Have a great rest of your day.
And be safe out there. Bye, everyone.
Thanks, Aaron, the hostess with the mostest.
Thanks, Aaron. Thanks, Lori. Thanks, you guys.
Thanks,
Bye.
guys.
Take care.
Bye-bye.